On Campus with Dr. Gary McCaleb. Tonight's guest is the president of Hunt Oil Company, Mr. Ray Hunt, and the dean of the College of Business at Abilene Christian University, Dr. Bill Petty. Here's Gary McCaleb.
On campus today is Mr. Ray Hunt, President and Chief Executive Officer of Hunt Oil Company. And joining us is Dr. Bill Petty, the Dean of the College of Business at ACU. Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
One of the things that I think is always interesting is to hear about how a company began and sort of a brief history or overview of the ups and downs, perhaps, of that company. I wonder if you could give us a brief history of Hunt Oil Company.
More than happy to. Hunt Oil Company will be observing its 50th year next year. It was founded in the 1930s and really was an outgrowth of business activities that my father carried on individually prior to that time. The company, Hunt Oil Company, was primarily set up at the time my father, H.L. Hunt, moved into East Texas and participated in the discovery and the development of the East Texas oil field. Prior to that time, he'd been active in North Louisiana and Arkansas. The company enjoyed quite a bit of success in the East Texas area, and then later when Central Louisiana, South Louisiana, and the offshore Gulf of Mexico emerged as oil provinces, the company moved into those areas and again was very fortunate. Today we're active in 17 or 18 states, the primary areas being Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Mississippi, Alabama, and up in the Rockies and North Dakota, Montana. We're also active in 6 or 7 foreign countries, including China, the North Sea, the Middle East, and a couple of other areas.
I guess one thing about the oil industry is there's always been some ups and downs. Has there been any more volatile period than the last 5 or 6 years?
The last 5 years have been a virtual roller coaster for the industry, as I'm sure everybody is well aware. For 3 years, really beginning in the 77, 78 time period, we had a boom that was unprecedented in the history of the industry. And again, it was a function of a variety of different factors all occurring simultaneously. If you had to pick a starting point for it, I think you'd say it was the Iranian Revolution and the oil shortages that we experienced, but even more so that were perceived at that point in time. And for several years, as we all know, the future projections for the price of oil were that the price would, in some cases, expected to get up to $100 a barrel. Well, a lot of things were misjudged. Conservation, the amount of oil and gas that could be discovered and produced. There are a variety of things that just were plain misjudged. The bubble burst about 2 years ago, and the industry at this point in time is going through one of the most difficult periods of its history. I personally think that we've reached or we've passed the deepest point in the trough, and that we're in the early stages of recovery. And I think that the industry will be a very profitable one and one with a lot of promise for the companies that are involved in it in the future.
I've heard some people say that during that boom period that you were describing, a lot of people who maybe really didn't know the oil business as well as they should were attracted to it because it just looked like such a good place to be putting your money and your investments at that time. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Again, when the expectations were that the price of oil and gas would just continue to rise, you had a lot of money come into the industry for the wrong reasons. The tax rates that were operative at the time were such that caused people to put money into, in effect, tax shelters without really taking a close, hard look at the underlying economics, or more precisely, the lack of same. Companies were created that never should have come into being, that had a very detrimental effect in the industry as older established companies experienced high personnel turnover. And when you lose people, especially at a senior level, you lose continuity and experience, and the performance of a lot of the companies in the industry suffered. Likewise, you basically had more money in the industry than you should have had chasing a smaller number of quality prospects. That caused the price of wildcat leases to go up, the cost of drilling wells to go up, and a number of economic distortions. And those all contributed to the bust, which began in late 1981. As these companies are leaving the industry now, many of those distortions are being removed. In fact, today the cost of finding oil, the cost of drilling wells and buying leases and all the different things you have to do, those costs have decreased considerably from where they were 2 years ago.
Was the decline in the oil price the only cause for the bust?
Well, the decline in the oil price was a function of several things, and several things contributed to the decline, and the decline in turn has created a snowball effect. The perception that the prices would continue to rise forever, that was proven false in 1981. The effect of the worldwide recession had not been sufficiently anticipated, nor had the effect of conservation. When those two things happened and demand for oil decreased dramatically, you basically had an oversupply of oil and really gas. That is what caused the price to drop. When prices fell, you found then that a number of companies that had borrowed heavily to become involved in the oil and gas industry, especially the new companies, they did not have the collateral value to support the loans that they had made, because if they had reserves in the ground, the reserves were assigned a lower value and thus could not support the amount of debt they had. That then led to a round of bankruptcies, and or for companies that didn't have bankruptcy problems, it led to a significantly decreased level of activity, drilling, etc., which then put more pressure on the drilling companies and the service and the supply sector of the industry.
If I understood what you were saying a while ago, you think we're really out of the darkest part and moving back into at least a somewhat more optimistic future for the oil industry, which of course is good news for our area, because it's such a, well, at least a great deal of our economy is related to oil and gas and exploration and things like this. Do you think exploration will continue, or will continue to grow or to turn back up now?
I definitely think so, and I think we've reached we've passed the worst point. Basically, the pendulum swung way too far in the optimistic direction in the latter part of the 70s. It swung then, in my opinion, too far to the pessimistic side of the spectrum in the early 80s, and now it's swinging back toward the middle, which is where it should be. I think that with the economic improvement that we're seeing in the United States, and I think the United States improvement will fuel improvement and cause the rest of the world economy to improve, that's going to increase demand for oil and gas. Secondly, oil stocks have been drawn down to historic lows, and as demand increases, you're going to have to replenish those stocks to a greater degree than you normally would have to. Thirdly, we've had two very, very mild winters. If this winter and next winter are more normal, increases in the demand for natural gas will occur. And lastly, the amount of drilling for natural gas has fallen off the edge of the table. There just are very, very few wells in relative terms being drilled for natural gas right now. The surplus that we have today in the natural gas area is a surplus of deliverability and not of reserves. And you have a number of fields, gas fields right now, that are producing at very high volumes, and they're producing gas into the marketplace where there's not a lot of demand for gas. Over the next couple of years, I think you're going to see an increase in demand for gas, yet as these fields decrease, as their normal decline begins to take place in terms of the amount of gas that's produced from the fields, you're not going to have new fields coming in to take up the slack. And you could very well be looking at a gas shortage beginning to develop in the 85, 86 time frame.
How do you feel about the interest that is being focused now on alternative sources of energy?
Alternative sources, I think, was the area that was damaged the most in the last several years as prices fell and the industry went into a major decline. And some of that is bad. Some of it I don't think is that bad, because I think that especially during the Carter administration seemed to feel like we were in immediate danger or near-term danger of running out of conventional supplies of oil and gas. I disagree strongly with that. I think there is a lot of oil and gas yet to be found that's conventional in nature, and that as the exploratory tools of the industry continue to improve, we'll be able to find and produce those reserves. Therefore, it doesn't make sense to put a ton of money into projects and research aimed at producing oil that would cost twice as much at the consumer level as conventional oil. I think it is unfortunate that nuclear has been set back as far as it has, and I feel coal has been moved back in time as to achieving its true optimum position as an energy source in our society. I think that in terms of real, true research into synthetic fuels, that's been pushed back to the end of the century.
So you're really pretty optimistic that we're not anywhere close to running out of oil and gas as far as even within territorial United States?
I very strongly believe that, and the reasons really are twofold. First, there has been a dramatic improvement and some dramatic advances in the area of geophysics in just the last 5 years. Today, you can go into areas that just 5 years ago you could not get good reflections or records, and today you can get excellent reflections and pictures, in effect, of the prospects that you think may contain oil and gas. Additionally, engineering advances have been such that we can drill in areas that we couldn't have before. And this is going to allow us to bring forth additional reserves that, again, just a few years ago you would have no chance of defining. Another thing that is really not given the proper amount of attention, I believe, relates to recovery of reserves from existing fields. Today none of the existing fields we have are projected to produce all the oil we know is there. Your existing fields produce only a fraction of the oil in place. And as production techniques improve, I feel in the future we'll be able to recover more and more oil from existing fields that we know are there today.
We're going to need to take a break here for just a minute, and then we'll be back and continue to visit with Mr. Ray Hunt, President and Chief Executive Officer of Hunt Oil Company, but a man who's also involved in some other businesses as well, and we'll be talking with him about those.
Abilene Christian University is a place where people really matter, a concept held since the school's beginning in 1906. Well, today, more than 4,500 students from across the nation enroll in ACU in the middle of West Texas because they know it's where people really matter. The university's academic program reflects people orientation and preparation on both the undergraduate and graduate levels. If you agree that people really matter, you'll love Abilene Christian University.
We're back on campus and continuing to visit with Mr. Ray Hunt, President and Chief Executive Officer of Hunt Oil Company. We've been talking about all of the influences and effects that the oil industry is having to deal with and cope with in the last few years, and I think Bill Petty was about to ask a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how big of a role will the government play in the future of the oil industry?
Well, it's played a very dominant role in the past, and I would hope it would play less of a role in the future. Obviously, there's a very proper role for government to play in all of industry. I think that most people would feel, who would take a close look at the industry, that the industry has had much more regulation than it should have had, however, and that the results have been very counterproductive. With respect to natural gas, gas used to be unregulated until 1954, when the Supreme Court, on a 5-4 vote, extended a law that had been passed, I think, in the 30s, and was designed to regulate gas pipelines. The Supreme Court extended this to cover gas produced at the wellhead, and it created a number of distortions as government agencies tried to regulate the price of gas based on a cost of service public utility type of approach, which was totally impractical. At one point, if you had, say, 4 companies that owned an interest in a single well, this was at its very worst, each company would sell its gas at a different price, even though the commodity was the same commodity. We've gone through a succession of different phases of regulation over the last 20 or so years, well, longer than that. And right now, as you know, there's a bill in Congress to hopefully deregulate the gas industry. I'm not optimistic as to its passing. I think it's been up there too long, and we're getting into the political season for the presidential elections next year. The industry has not adopted a uniform position of support. The industry, unfortunately, tends to fragment itself, and it's done so with respect to this gas bill. And thus I predict that there will not be a deregulation bill, and the Natural Gas Policy Act, under which we now are operating, will run its course and expire in 1985.
In addition to all of your involvement in the oil industry, I know you're also involved in the real estate industry.
Right.
What's your evaluation of the current health of the real estate industry?
That tends to vary on a market-by-market basis. Our real estate activities are exclusively in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we've been involved in building office buildings in both Dallas and Fort Worth. We built the Hyatt hotels in both cities, and we also are involved in industrial parks. We are not involved in residential building or apartment building. Our experience in the Dallas-Fort Worth area has been very, very positive, and the area has been very strong. In fact, we've looked at going into other markets, but felt that there was no reason to when we had such a strong market in our own backyard. If we were in Houston, I don't think our experience would be quite so strong right now. I was down there the other day, and someone said that there's something like 30 million square feet, 30 million plus square feet of excess office space, and that makes it sort of tough on the developers. Dallas is overbuilt now, but not by near the degree, and the Dallas-Fort Worth economy is a much more diversified one than Houston, and we are already seeing our economy pick back up significantly as affects real estate.
And in addition to real estate, then you're also involved in the publishing business, I suppose. You have several different publications. Could you enumerate the publications you're involved with?
We're involved in the magazine sector of the publishing business, and have what they call city magazines. In two cases, it's the D magazine, which is the city magazine for Dallas, Houston City Magazine, which is the city magazine for Houston. We have Texas Homes, which is sort of an architectural digest type of magazine for Texas, although we have a surprising amount of interest in that magazine outside the boundaries of the state. And then a couple of years ago, as a turnaround situation, we sort of rolled the dice and bought Sport Magazine, which is a monthly national publication. In fact, it's the oldest sports publication around. It's older than Sports Illustrated, and it's been a very interesting challenge, and knock on the wood, so far it's worked out very, very well for us.
The whole publications industry seems to have moved away from totally national kinds of magazines to more regional and localized magazines, and it sounds like that's at least a major part of the market you've gone into with the city magazines.
That's absolutely true, and you know, the advent of TV and the electronic media has totally changed the way that magazines and newspapers need to operate. And like with Sport Magazine, instead of being a reporting vehicle, there's some of that, but primarily we have postured that magazine, as after we took it over, as being sort of the predicting entity. It comes out once a month. It doesn't try to tell you what happened last month, but it's looking ahead to the next season and telling you what it is that the staff of Sport Magazine thinks is going to happen, what teams are going to do well, who's going to go to the Super Bowl, that kind of thing.
Well, from that cumulative perspective of oil and gas industry, real estate industry, publications, I think with our Dean of the College of Business here, we'd both be interested in hearing what would you say you expect a College of Business to do for a business major in preparation for a career in any of your organizations or in the business world?
You know, that is an excellent question, and I might add that our company's chief financial officer is a graduate, and he has done just a fantastic job for us, having come out of the business school. And the most important element, I think, that someone needs to possess coming out of school is the ability to think. I think that if people go into a business school program and think that they're going to come out having learned the rules by which a particular task or function is going to be done, they are really kidding themselves. Instead, they need to come out having an understanding of the broad parameters of how business takes place. But primarily, they need to be able to think, to adjust, to adapt, because the business community is constantly changing. And again, Doc Cornut, who graduated here from Abilene Christian, has just done a phenomenal job for us, and that's his greatest strength. He can go into a situation, you can change all the ground rules for him, and within 30 minutes he's adjusted to it, and he's on a brand new course. And I think that the regimen that you all have here is one that a lot of other business schools ought to adopt, because a lot of business schools, I think, try to produce a very rigidly defined product, and they're kidding themselves in terms of how well that product, i.e. the student, is going to do when they get out in the real world.
There are a lot of organizations every year that begin, and you talked about them in the oil industry a while ago, but there are also a lot of organizations every year that shut down for one reason or other. What would you say, based on your experience, is the key or keys to running a successful organization and keeping it afloat, and keeping it healthy?
Well, first of all, I think that any organization or any company is like any other living organism. I think it's constantly changing. If it ever ceases to change, it's dead. And a company needs to constantly be able to adapt and adjust to whatever the new circumstances are. The key, I feel the single most important asset which any company has is the people who comprise it. And if you have the right people, everything else tends to sort of take care of itself. I view my most important job, far and away, above anything else in the Hunt Oil Company, is the attraction, the motivation, and the retention of the very best people possible. If that occurs, all the other things will happen that will bring about success.
Are you a fairly decentralized or centralized organization?
We are decentralized to the greatest extent we can. Our theory is to have as few people as possible, to delegate as much responsibility as we possibly can, give people authority, and then basically stay out of their way. You know, try to monitor how they're doing, but basically stay out of their way.
One of the questions that I hear students ask a lot here at school is, how totally do I have to give myself to a job or to a career in order to feel like I can be a success? In other words, do I really have to forfeit all of the other things that I might think are important in my life? If I really want to be successful in a career, do I have to be a workaholic to do it? How would you answer that question?
I would think that one of the worst things that could happen would be for a person to go into a job feeling that they had to be a workaholic. You've got to have balance in every segment of your life, and if your job or your position doesn't give you a situation where you can really feel comfortable with yourself, then you shouldn't go into it. You shouldn't take that position. There is no substitute for hard work. To get ahead, you're going to have to apply yourself and apply, you know, what you've picked up through your educational process. So I don't want to suggest that hard work isn't a very, very necessary ingredient. And the guys that do get ahead will work more than 9 to 5, and they will put in more than 40 hours a week. By the same token, you've got to have balance. You've got to take care of your body, maintain a good physical program for yourself. You need to have recreational pursuits to recharge the batteries. You've got to keep your personal life, your family life in balance. I can't think of anything worse than achieving all sorts of great business successes and then finding that you've blown it with your family. And at least we at Hunt Oil, we encourage people to have as balanced a personal life as they can. And in fact, we will not hire people who would appear to us to be have their balance too far in any one direction.
In a related sense, there was an article, or there's been a series of articles in the Wall Street Journal on the ethics in business. The general public seems to perceive business people as being relatively unethical. Are the young people going to face a problem here?
I really don't think so. Now, I guess every company is, you know, an individual company, and there's some companies that are bad companies, just like there's some individuals in society that are bad individuals. But our experience has been that ethics in business are in many respects higher than in a lot of other areas. And I know as a company, we just want to do business with people who we have to worry about in that regard.
I'm sorry that we're out of time because this has been a most enjoyable visit. Thank you very much for being with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And Bill, thank you for joining us. We've been visiting today with Mr. Ray Hunt, President and Chief Executive Officer of Hunt Oil Company. And also joining us has been Dr. Bill Petty, the Dean of the College of Business at ACU. Be back with us again next week on campus.
Why advertise in The Optimist? We'll give you 5,000 reasons why. By advertising in The Optimist, your business will be exposed to the 4,500 students of Abilene Christian University, as well as its 500 employees. Your business will enjoy exposure to part of Abilene's $11.5 million collegiate market. The Optimist reaches this market twice a week and 55 times during the school year. There are a lot of reasons for advertising in The Optimist, so why not give us a call? We can satisfy your advertising needs.
This has been an ACU television production.